You need to understand, in the summer of 2004, the best-selling book in France, on French Amazon, was a 123-page book called Au Bon Vacances, which was a manual on how to draw a paycheck while doing no work without getting fired, by exploiting every element of French law. Written by a woman whose theory was France is run by an oligarchy who exploit us, and therefore we owe it to them to counter-exploit them by taking the money without work. Now, I spent 2 years giving speeches to business groups and saying, this is suicidal. These attitudes are going to kill the French economy. Nicolas Sarkozy, who comes of an unusual background. His father was an emigre from Hungary, fled the communists in 1948. His mother's grandfather was Jewish from Salonika, so he's not a traditional French elite school. He entered politics at 15. He rose by sheer brute hard work and being brilliant. He became the head of the Conservative Party, then he became the Minister of Finance, then he became Minister of the Interior. And here's what's fascinating about where we are today, and why I think there's a real parallel. Jacques Chirac had been president for 12 years. The French were sick of it. His polling numbers were much lower than President Bush's. The left had nominated a relatively attractive socialist woman. Not that I'm drawing a direct parallel, but the left had nominated a relatively attractive socialist woman. And most political scientists would have told you that she should win because they've had 12 years of center-right government. People are fed up with it. Therefore, that's the natural opposition. Sarkozy was brilliant. First of all, something I really recommend that you work on here. He developed 16 channels on the internet on the grounds that the French media was so far to the left. French media starts at the New York Times and goes to the left. And so he knew he wouldn't get a fair break. And so what he said was, I'm going to have a conversation with you, the voters, and they can cover you and me having a conversation. And he worked very intensely at building this. He had created a very bold moment because he said, while serving in Chirac's cabinet, France has to have a clean break. Now, all of his advisors said, oh, you can't say that. And he said, well, that's why you're the advisor. I'm saying it because it's true. And it doesn't mean that he's being offensive to Chirac any more than when I say we need a clean break, I'm being offensive to President George W. Bush. But I'll tell you, I have a very radical view. Levees shouldn't fail. Bridges shouldn't fall. Schools should actually educate, and borders should be controlled. That's a clean break. You can't get there from here unless you change. So I think the slogan ought to be, real change requires real change. Simple, weird, and then you can watch. This is the problem in Lansing. It's the problem with the Detroit schools. You know, the same bureaucrats huddle in the same room with the same interest group lobbyists to talk about, we're going to really change things. And they hold a press conference and say, this is going to be really new and different. Baloney. It's either real change or it isn't real change. That's why we founded American Solutions, to begin to lay out, not for the presidency. There are 513,000 elected officials in the United States. We need real change at the county commission. We need real change at the city government. We need real change at the school board. We need real change in the state legislature. We need real change in the Congress. The president's only one out of 513,000 elected Americans. And we need to have a wave of change across this country that is fundamental. So I'm for real change. Now Sarkozy went a stage further. He reduced his campaign to 3 themes. And I know that Rudy talked about one of them last night. But I just want to drive this home because it is so relevant to how you think about the future of Michigan. His first theme was, you can come to France, but you must learn to be French. That captures, if you replace France with America and French with American, that captures who we are. Let me tell you the big lie about our elites. This country is not anti-immigrant, period. And to say that those of us who want the law enforced are against immigration is a lie. This country is pro-immigration on two conditions. It be legal and they learn to be American. Totally shake up the establishment of this state. If you were committed to competing in every district, in the primary as well as the general, and you went out and said, I want to find a candidate who is for English as the official language of government, for enforcing the law, for intensive education in English, and for legal immigration, but against any employer hiring anybody knowingly who's illegal, you would have an 85% majority or an 80% majority in every district in this state, including the most Democratic. And they might well, in inner city Detroit and in the most hardened industrial union areas, they might well elect a reform Democrat in the primary where they wouldn't elect a Republican in the general election. That's how big the difference is. And that's why a center-right majority has to start by reaching out to everybody in the entire country who agrees across party lines to build the momentum of this kind of change. Sarkozy's second position, after having said you can come to France but you must be French, you must learn to become French, his second position was equally bold. He said, I will enforce the law. I know it's a hard line. He's in a country where last year there were 15,000 cars burned. They'd acquired this cultural habit. If you were an unemployed young male and you didn't have a car, you thought on Friday night, well, why should I walk while the bourgeois drive? And so you'd go out with your friends and burn a car. And this was just going on everywhere. And Sarkozy represented the people who thought they didn't want to have their cars burned. Well, it turned out the number of people who didn't want their cars burned was larger than the number of people who wanted cars burned. Which gets me to one of my most important principles that I'm trying desperately to teach Republicans. Because we don't have the natural majoritarian pattern. This is why Reagan was so extraordinary, because he was an FDR Democrat. He understood. To be a majority is simple. You have to find a majority. Let me give you an example. I use English because it's such an easy one. 85% of the American people believe English ought to be the official language of government. That's an enormous margin. About 10% don't believe it, of whom half are tenured faculty members. It's true. Now, the way I've decided, because I'm trying to retrain a party I belong to, I've been an active Republican volunteer since 1960. So I've spent a long time trying to do this. I haven't succeeded all of it. We're describing this as, not as numbers, because we figure most people don't get numbers. 85 to 10, okay. I guess I'm for the 85. We're now doing really big circle, the 85, really tiny circle for the 10. And we're saying to people, try to learn how to be with the big circle. That's bold, you know, I understand.